welcome back or welcome to my little bookish channel. It is I, Allie. Hello. Today we are going to be doing a January reading wrap up. I haven't done one of these in a really long time and I'm really excited. I also just want to apologise if I start sweating uncontrollably. It is ridiculously hot here. In Melbourne we have a heat wave warning. Oh, woo. Okay, I'm just going to do this chronologically, and majority of these books I won't be talking about them at length because I have reading vlogs either already out or about to come out. Spoiler alert. Let's just go. Okay, so my first book of 2025 really just sets the tone for this year, I think. Even though January was a shit show, did everyone collectively experience the same January? Not only was it a shit show, but it was also a month that went for 5 years. Anyway, but I also had some really high highs, but some also quite low lows. A shit show. Anyway, let's go back to books. The first book of the year, oh my lord, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I have an entire vlog coming out next week. When you watch this, it is next week, about this entire series. It's incredible. So The Final Empire is book 1 in the Mistborn trilogy, era 1. What do I say about this book? We are introduced to our sort of main characters. We have Vin, we have Calcia, we eventually have a few others. This is a fantastic fantasy. The magic system is so unique and so fascinating. It took me a while to understand what the fuck was going on, but it's because I think I'm not used to that type of magic system. It's based on metal. It's called allomancy, and you ingest metals, and depending on the metal that you ingest gives you specific abilities, but only a few people can be a Mistborn, because Mistborn means that you can utilize all metals. There are a few others who are still allomancers, but they're called Mistings, and they only can ingest and utilize one metal. It's an incredible work of fiction, incredible piece of fantasy. I loved this so much. The ending, I think the ending of this book, and possibly all the books in this trilogy, killed me in some way. I wasn't expecting the way that it ended because I didn't think Brandon Sanderson had the balls to do that, but balls he had. Okay, I just loved it so much. I can't really speak a lot about the plot because if I start, I won't stop and then it will go into spoiler territory. But there is a Lord Ruler who is lording over the entire empire and not doing so well. But the Lord Ruler is essentially this kind of god to the people, and well, there's a rebellion, let's just say that. Incredible, incredible time. 5 stars. Are we surprised? And then the next book I read was for the Read Good Challenge. That is hosted and created by Ben at Ben Reads Good here on YouTube and on Instagram. The first prompt for for January was read a book by an author with a variation of the name Anne. I have none except for Anne Rice, The Queen of the Damned. I don't want to read that book. Not in the first month of the year. I feel like that's a book that I'll read sometime, but not at the start. So instead I decided to use the wildcard prompt, which is read a book by Agatha Christie. And so that's what I did. And just a trigger warning for spiders, because this book cover is absolutely atrocious. I'm not even joking, it's not an exaggeration. Are you ready? Yeah. It's atrocious, but it gets the job done, I think. It's kind of creepy and mysterious. You're like, why is there a spider in this woman's head? It's interesting. Anyway, I actually read Appointment with Death by Agatha Christie. I am looking at my reading journal. I gave this 3 stars. I don't know what it was about. Like, how am I going to collect my thoughts about this book? Because on one hand, I always at least enjoy Agatha Christie. It was written well. You know, the characters are interesting most of the time. In this case, we're focusing on a family, and we're actually focusing on this family from the outside. So you have characters that are on the outside of the family itself, looking at the characters and how they're behaving and the dynamics of these characters. And we spend quite a lot of time doing that, like getting to know this family and their really evil matriarch. The matriarch, I forgot her name, Mrs. Boynton, I believe. She's horrible. She's an atrocious woman, and she's an atrocious mother. She controls, coerces through like fear and threats her family to maintain her own control. And then she's murdered, which isn't a spoiler, it's literally on the back of the book. But the murder doesn't happen for a really long time. It didn't occur until halfway through the book. I think maybe because I'm so used to other Agatha Christie books where the murder happens quite quickly, and then we're on the journey with Poirot of investigating. Whereas this was slightly different. Poirot comes in at the halfway point when he is asked to like consult on this murder. This takes place in Jerusalem, and it's fine. I was kind of disappointed in this. The best thing about this book, it is a study about a family from the perspectives Sarah King and Dr. Gerard, who are also kind of on this holiday tour with them. That was the interesting thing. But the actual Poirot aspect, the actual investigation, was subpar and slightly boring for me. I think because the formula of a Poirot novel seemed much more emphasized because it happened in such a short time. And I have to admit, the unveiling of the evidence and therefore the person who committed the crime was again boring. And it goes on for chapters, and I typically enjoy that aspect of a Poirot novel. You know, it's a crowd, like all the suspects or all the people involved are like in a room, and he's like, well, I usually enjoy that, but this one I didn't. It was really boring. And I'm just like, what is the point of this? Like, do you need to have a stage? Do you need to make it a theatre sort of situation? Like, I really was annoyed about the performance aspect of it. The twist was fine. It was just fine. Like, if this was just a study of this family and Poirot doesn't come into it, I think it would have been so much more interesting. And Poirot in this is slightly hypocritical, which I thought was funny, because the majority of the time Poirot is thinking that the children themselves committed the murder of their own mother. And Sarah, I'm pretty sure it was Sarah, one of the characters, was like, and if they did, does it matter? Like, she's an atrocious human being. She obviously abused them mentally and emotionally and maybe physically, we don't know. Would it matter if they did kill her and snap? And he's like, oh, well, it's justice, blah, blah, blah. And then she turns around and she's like, yeah, but didn't you, not arrest the murderers on, the Orient Express? Because you felt that they were also slightly justified in that murder? And then Poirot kind of, stutters a bit and is like, I'm for the justice. I am law enforcement. It's like, babe, you're not making sense. So I really liked that Sarah King was like, no, but you've done this before. Think of context. Think about this. And also, I didn't really like the non-explanation we get as to why Mrs. Boynton is an atrocious human being. The only thing we get is that she was a warden of a prison and she liked the power and she was most likely attracted to that position because she was already atrocious. But we get nothing else. I don't know. I feel like she needed to be a bit more fully fleshed out. That's my 2 cents. That is Appointment with Death by Agatha Christie. And the next book I read was an interesting one, and I'm going to have to look at my notes because although I enjoyed the reading experience of it and I thought it was really unique, I don't really remember much about it. So I read this book for the Read Around the World book club. I forgot what it's called, but it was created and is hosted by Emma from the YouTube channel Emmy. This is the invention of moral or morale, not too sure how you pronounce that word, by Adolfo Bioy Cesades. I gave this 4 stars. I read this quite quickly. It's a very short novel, and I believe this was for Argentina. I typically do love South American fiction because I think the way that South American authors tell their stories is so much more intriguing, much more unique and creative in the way that they use their voice, in how they actually tell the story, in how they utilize kind of history and typically more like speculative aspects and slightly supernatural or incorporation of the like folklore. It really just works for me. So I do love South American fiction. This book, we have a man who I believe is unnamed. He's a fugitive and he runs away from life in prison to this kind of uninhabited island that he heard about. This island is particularly intriguing to him because it was purchased by a rich man. They created a museum, a pool, and also created a chapel. But then no one lives there anymore. It's just gone. Like there's no people. But our narrator lives there and he is dealing with a lot of loneliness, obviously, and the crippling realization that he can never actually go back to his reality. He can never go back to civilization in a sense because he could be caught and then put back to prison. I don't think we're ever told specifically why he was in prison, or was it implied that it was because he was a sort of rebel? I'm not too sure. And then he starts hearing noises, and those noises are people speaking, and he starts singing them. And he's like, what the fuck? Are there people here and I don't know? And as the reader, you're wondering, is this just his imagination? Is he imagining these people because of his loneliness? But then it gets a bit weird. This is where the weirdness comes in. And you find out that Moral, who is a man, I forgot his first name, he invented, he invented this machine that is like a recorder, like it records, it's a camera, but it's sort of like Big Brother. So these cameras are everywhere recording everything that you do, everything that you say. The problem is that this camera, like the process of recording, it takes your soul away. So the implication there is that at the end, you will not exist, but your recording will. So therefore you will be immortal because your recording will play until the end of time. And so our narrator eventually figures it out. He overhears Moral talking himself, and now the narrator is writing his own journal. So whatever he sees, whatever he feels, he's writing this down. And what we have kind of interwoven within this story is our narrator falls for a woman who has been recorded. Her name is Faustine. And what he does is he turns the machine on, he figures it out, and he records himself with her. So to an outsider watching this, if they ever find the island, it'll look like he was a part of it and he was with her. And something about that was just so heartbreaking, like really, truly sad. I wrote here that an aspect of what the author is trying to explore, is exploring, is reality a construction of the human mind? And I think he really emphasizes that, and I enjoyed it. I remember finished reading it and I'm just like, oh, I have a quote here that I got from an article that I read about this book, and I don't have the citation, which is unlike me, but I've quoted here. It is also about the comic and tragic lengths to which lovers will resort, the inability to master one's ultimate destiny, and the existential solitude of life. Yeah, it kind of hits you in the guts. But that's that book. And then the next book that I read was a bit of a surprise, actually. I got a message from a friend of mine, Georgie. She's like, have you read this book? And I said, no, but it's on my shelf. Should I read it? She's like, yes. So that was like really paraphrasing our conversation. But I finally picked up Brutes by Diz Tate. So whatever I'm going to say, I'm not going to do it justice. So I'm going to link to Georgie's beautifully written blog post about this book, because you need to also gobble that up. It is an incredibly written piece. This is about the monstrous feminine. We have a group of girls. Majority of this book is written in a chorus, so it's we, it's plural, but that's when they're young. And then when it gets to them being older, it goes to a first person perspective, and that shock is really confronting as a reader, because it's fantastically written. Anyway, so we have a story of a group of girls and one boy, but this group are basically like the watchers of this very low socioeconomic town, or suburb I should say, and they're absolutely obsessed with this one girl named, I believe it's Sammy. She's the preacher's daughter who goes missing, but they know where she is and they know what happened. And you just go through their experiences, and then interspersed is them kind of in present day reeling with certain aspects of this period of their life. It's very weird. It perfectly captures being a young girl. It perfectly captures it. The cruelty, the fact that young people, especially as children, as teenagers, still forming their identity, trying to figure out who they are, and their morality is slightly, because they're working out boundaries. It's fantastic. This book is fantastic, and it really reminded me of Bunny in a lot of ways, just because Diz Tate did not care about making you care about these characters. The fact that they're likable or unlike, she didn't care. Diz Tate didn't want likable characters. She wanted messy. She wanted chaotic. She wanted the true, girlhood experience of losing innocence, of figuring out that the world is actually a really crap place. It was amazing. And I think I've written down some quotes that I want to share. This book was beautifully written. Okay, we copied his style when we fought with our mothers, and it always made them cry. We wished they would fight back and beat us, but when we acted like men, we always won. For a long time, I didn't understand why, but now I think that to humiliate a woman is the only way some men know how to love one. I mean, we hid our faces because we were certain that someday someone else would reveal them back to us, tuck our hair behind our ears and tell us how beautiful we were, had been all along, in secret. I often feel like I am living my life 3 feet to the left of my body. I let her live her life over there while I watch her. I prefer to be empty and cavernous. Truly a masterpiece. I loved it. The writing was stunning. The characters were atrocious. The setting was perfect. I could feel the humidity of Florida, because this takes place in Florida. I could feel the humidity. I could feel the stickiness. It left me confused also, which I love being confused in books. I've told this before. Because there's something in the lake. And is there something in the lake? Or is it a symbol for the trauma that they experienced during that period? Or is the monster them? I don't know. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. I would recommend, would I recommend this? If you're a Bunny girl and a Tessa Moshfegh girl, then you're most likely a Brutes girl. Just try it. You'll have an enjoyable, if not very strange, time. Brutes. This is taking longer than I anticipated, so I'm going to move it along. So the next two books I'm going to do at the same time because I'm not going to be talking about this quite a lot. So I read The Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, book 2 and 3 in their Mistborn trilogy. What can I say? 5 stars. This trilogy is absolutely incredible. The ending of this series broke me, and you will see that in next week's video. I think that these stories like are slightly coming of age because how the characters develop, how Vin develops, how Eland develops, amazing. You are still learning about this world and it blowing your mind even more. It's expanding. In the last book, I should say, what we find out in the last book, the way that something that you thought would be insignificant becomes the most significant, insane. Brandon Sanderson knows how to write. He's amazing, incredible, iconic, one of my favorite fantasy authors writing. These are amazing. I would recommend watching my Mistborn vlog when it comes out next week. I read, where is it? The 11th Metal, which is a Cosmere short story that is within this collection, Arcanum Unbounded. The 11th Metal follows Calcia, and it's after he becomes Mistborn and he's being mentored when he's being mentored. And you find out the way that a particular entity is just moving pieces on a chessboard. And it's incredible. I gave this 3 stars. I loved this. This is Onyx Storm, book 3 in the Empyrean series. Book 1 was Fourth Wing, book 2 was Iron Flame. I loved this so much, 5 stars. It was so fun. It was so dramatic. It was ridiculous. It was funny. Things happen. I have a few issues, well, not issues, but it's like a few things that I was a bit about. I went on a reading retreat to Phillip Island with a few friends of mine just for this book, and it was so fun because you need to read these books with people. It is the best way. And if you want to know more about this book, watch my reading vlog. I literally did an entire vlog. It's like an hour long of me reading this book. So do it. Do it. But what else can I say other than I'm really excited for how this series is going to move forward in the future. I think the ending opens up a lot of potential for just really interesting things to happen. So yeah, Onyx Storm, baby. And then I did something that I wasn't expecting to do in the month of January. I didn't expect to read Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, but I did. I gobbled this up, and you will also see me reading this in my Mistborn vlog next week. This was amazing. I can't believe that Brandon Sanderson considers this to be not a good book in terms of his writing. If he said that, I cannot wait to read the rest of the Cosmere. Elantris is about, well, it's mainly told from the perspective of 3 characters. We have Hrathen, who is essentially a bishop. He's a Derethi Gjorn, and he's a religious man, religious leader, I should say, of the enemy kingdom, who is basically colonizing all the countries that they can, invading, colonizing, and just wreaking havoc. And then we have Serene, who is a princess that comes to the kingdom of Arelon in order to marry the prince, and the prince is Prince Raoden. But Raoden, he doesn't meet Serene, and because what happens is he becomes an Elantrian. So Elantris used to be this amazing city within a city. It housed these almost divine beings who could live forever. But 10 years before this book begins, something happens to the magic that helps the transformation of an ordinary person into an elantrian. Something happens to that magic and the transformation is essentially corrupted. But we find out that it's not necessarily a corruption, it's just that it is an unfinished transformation. So they become this sort of like corpse-like creatures because they're in between, and they are then imprisoned in Elantris. And that's what happens to Raoden. But Serene is told that Raoden was dead. So she's like, what the fuck am I going to do here? Well, she is a bad bitch. I love Serene. I loved her so much. She's this like really politically intelligent woman who's like, no, let's change the way things are going. And unknowingly, in the beginning, to her, she essentially like steps into the shoes of Raoden, because Raoden was like, my dad is literally killing this country. So he has a group that he talks to, like, what can we do to help our empire? And she basically becomes the leader of that group. And it's just a wonderful story. I consider this a much more contemplative book in the sense that you're just with the characters. Raoden is trying to find purpose in Elantris, and he then figures out that his purpose is to help other Elantrians feel purpose in order to create a home, and it's wonderful. And then you have Serene, who is trying to make her home better for everyone. A lot of things happen, but at the same time, it's much more not low-key. There's no, like, we're not having a battle scene every page like the Mistborn trilogy. It's more political. And I just thought it was fantastic. I read through this quite quickly, and I dog-eared so much because I loved everything that happened. It was amazing, and I highly recommend reading this book. I really do. And then I actually ended up reading 2 novellas in the Cosmere. I know January has been a Cosmere month. So I finally read The Emperor's Soul and The Hope of Elantris. The Hope of Elantris was just really adorable. It's a very, very short story, and you find out about like Serene and Raoden, like where they're at, and you also find out about a particular part of Elantris when one of the characters kind of disappears, and like what he was doing. It was just really, really cute. I really enjoyed it. 4 stars. It was adorable. And then I read The Emperor's Soul. I loved The Emperor's Soul. The Emperor's Soul, so from what I understand, it takes place in the same world as Elantris. But I don't think like the people in like Arelon and Teod and the rest of kind of that, I'm going to call them that hemisphere, I don't think they know that this empire exists, because Serene kind of makes a flyaway comment about like, I wonder what's over, I don't know if she talked about the mountains or like an ocean. It wouldn't be an ocean, maybe it was mountains, like no one knows what's over there. Maybe it could be that, because I don't think at any point in Elantris do we talk about this empire, or maybe we do and I just completely missed it. But the Emperor's Soul takes place in another empire, and the way that they use the magic of the world, which the Arelons call Door, is through stamps, and different people have different like stamping abilities, and our main character Shay is a forger, so she can forge things. Majority of the time they're like imitations of things, but she can also forge souls. It was really fascinating. Something happens to the Emperor, and then Shay's brought in and being like, you know, you've got to forge a soul for our Emperor. And she only really agrees to it because she can then not be in jail. I just really loved it. Again, it's more contemplative. You're with Shay as she's dealing with the fact that she has to forge, my posture is so bad, she has to forge this soul. She has no idea about who the Emperor is, so she has to study about the Emperor, reading his journal, talking to people who know him. And then she slowly realizes that maybe she can make him better in terms of make him a better ruler. I really loved it, and I can understand why everyone universally agrees that The Emperor's Soul is one of the best novellas that they've read. I understand that. I loved it. Gave it 4 stars. I don't think it's like one of my favorite novellas of all time because I've read really incredible novellas, but it is definitely one that really shows the talent of Brandon Sanderson. Anyone can write a novel, but not many people can write a good short story. There you go. That's my 2 cents. And then, I don't have it with me, but I borrowed White Sand Volume 1 by Brandon Sanderson, which is a graphic novel. I didn't like this. Wasn't expecting to say that ever about a Brandon Sanderson book, but I didn't. White Sand, I think, takes place in the Cosmere. I believe it takes place in the Cosmere. And we're following Canton, I don't remember his name, who wants to be like a sand master because the magic for them is with sand in this particular sect. And his dad's like, you're trash at it, so no. He's like, no, I want to do this trial, like let me do the trial. So the dad says, whatever, it's your funeral. He does the trial, he aces the trial, but then kind of causes a conundrum because his dad thinks that he's worthy to become a sand master. So at this big ceremony where they're handing out the promotions for people in like leveling up their mastery of the magic, Canton? I don't know his name, but we'll call him Canton. Canton is given the sash to be a sand master, but it was more that his dad did it like a, you gotta fail at this kind of thing. And no one really saw it, no one really heard about it. But what happened then was this huge battle. The Sandmasters and a particular group of people have been at odds with each other for a really long time, but they were in a period of peace because they just left each other alone. But all of a sudden this group came and like decimated all of them. And then Canton is alone. He meets some foreigners, not outsiders, some foreigners from a different part of the world who are on their own kind of journey trying to find out about a person and his expedition to finding what you eventually find out are the Sandmasters. And it kind of all comes together. Canton becomes like the only figurehead for the Sandmasters and like the sand magic, because all the other masters were killed and he was like he's the only remaining Mastral, I think it's called. And so it's a bit political and a bit battly, and I still have to read the other 2 volumes, which I'm waiting for from the library. It was fine. I didn't like it. I thought the story was mediocre. The art was amazing. The writing was ugh. I don't know. I think Brandon Sanderson like wrote the original story and then I think it was rewritten by someone for the graphic novel. I literally can't string words together. I don't mean rewritten, I mean like adapted by someone else for the graphic novel. I mean, honestly, Alex. I could be wrong. It wasn't amazing. I gave it 2 stars. I was really, not disappointed, but like, it was so bland. I'm like, this is the kind of story that needs to be a novel, because there are so many nuances that you don't get through a graphic novel. But that's it. That's all the books that I've read in January. I had a great reading month, and it was mostly because of Brandy Sandy. Anyway, I hope you had a great reading month. Let me know your favourite book that you read. I think my favourite books would be Mistborn. Top notch, amazing. I had such a good time. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fabulous day or evening, wherever you are. I will see you next week. Make sure you come back next week and watch my Mistborn vlog. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing it. Okay, bye friends.